audio professionals right there.
You heard it here first.
Hi, my name is Tyle Hertzens. I'm the editor-in-chief of Inner Fidelity, which is a website dedicated to headphones and personal audio and stuff. And I'm here with a group of very interesting individuals, and we're going to talk about the future of headphones. We'll go down the list here, and even though I made them all give me cards so I wouldn't forget their names, I'll let you all introduce yourself and say a few words about what you do for your respective companies. We'll just start with Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave Friesman. I work for Automotive Research. I work in the R&D division, consumer products. Is this better? I work in the R&D division. I work on consumer products development, earphones, Bluetooth headsets, some other RF devices, those types of things.
Scott Houston, product specialist at Sennheiser. Work in all consumer electronics, all headphones, in-ears, gaming, wireless.
Dan Clark, I'm the founder of Mr. Speakers. We make planar magnetic circumaural or over around the ear headphones. Brandon Mason, and I'm a co-founder of Noble Audio. We make universal fit and custom fit in-ear monitors.
All right, so we're going to talk about the future of headphones, and we're going to start probably in the now, roughly. And we'll just go down the line here again a little bit and talk about where your companies are now. What are you doing? Dave, what do you think is interesting about what you're currently doing at Automotive? What's there sort of a something that we may not know about, something interesting about what you're doing now, technologically or whatever?
Well, I mean, I don't know how to break that into the headphone market because we're kind of scattered into a bunch of different industries. And for us, consumer has not always been earphones. I mean, the basis of the company started in basically hearing aid research and things like that. So we do an awful lot of research around auditory hearing. We did something last year called the home hearing test, which basically packaged an earphone with a program that we worked on, and it basically allowed an end user to test their own hearing in their house. So we're really focused a lot on the audiological side of things. And that's mainly where we're at. I mean, we still do hi-fi stuff. We're still active in it. I can't talk about everything that we're working on. We always have a lot of projects going, but we're a small company, so it takes a little while for them all to get out. But they will eventually.
That's the trick about this talk, is that we can't actually talk about what these guys are going to do next year. You know, we can't talk about the future exactly with these guys.
Right. I mean, I would love to tell you.
We'll tap bounce around it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to tell you everything that we're working on because since I'm working on some of it, I think it's really cool. But I can't yet.
Do you know about the auto emission music that Neve did?
Yeah, I mean, I could speak to it, you know, sort of.
Just tell us
low-level information.
Just low-level information of what this is. Just kind of a weird thing. It's not really the future. It's just weird science.
The history of it was there was a violinist named Tartini who found that he could hear resonances, that he would actually hear tones coming off of his eardrum, is what it boils down to. And they use it for audiological research. We, on our medical side, we make products that are used for testing babies and things like that. I mean, you can test anybody with them, but they're good for babies because babies are really bad at giving hearing tests. They're not really good at telling you if they can hear or not. So it's a passive test, and it basically puts two tones down into the ear canal, and then by the reflection off of the tympanic membrane, you can measure what the hearing loss is, if there's any. And it's good because you can catch loss early.
Now, isn't there something about you can ping the ear with a tone and then it actually generates its own tone?
Yeah. They did that. Well, I mean, I wasn't there. That was over 10 years ago. But they did it where they played music into. They had to adjust so that they would get the right reflection off of it. But they basically played some of the sonatas, some of the Bach sonatas, and I can't remember if it was a Chacon or whatever. It doesn't matter. But they recorded it off of the eardrum of one of the engineers in the company, which is kind of cool. I think you might be able to get it on our website. If not, come bother me afterwards, and I'll get your info and get you a copy of it.
So basically what Neve did is he took a piece of music and he chopped it up into really little short pieces. And they sent this little blip, you know, 10th of a second of music at an eardrum, and then recorded what the eardrum sent back. And then he reassembled the eardrum sounds of this piece of music, and you could hear this piece of music. You could tell what it was. It didn't sound great or anything, but you could tell what it was, and it was generated by an eardrum. So Etymotic has been playing around with eardrums for a long, long time. Scott, right, Scott? Yes, Scott. Tell us about something cool that Sennheiser's doing.
No comment.
I can answer.
For us, a very big focus currently is advancement in wireless, especially with a few introductions we made at CES this past January with our Momentum second generation wireless, putting in a new noise guard hybrid, so a new level of noise cancellation into a Bluetooth piece where we're focusing on not just low frequencies, but higher frequencies as well, compensating for this sound degradation that would happen when that noise canceling circuitry is active. So trying to maintain a better overall sound reproduction when it can be manipulated. A lot of other very, very cool stuff certainly is in the works.
One of the things that plays into the future with Sennheiser that I see going on with Sennheiser right now is your emphasis on creating branded lines of products. You have the Urbanite line and you have the Momentum line. These are very clearly branded and sold or being pitched out there as a brand. How's that working for you?
So far, so good. The big focus has been brand awareness overall, to reach an audience that Sennheiser never really had in years past, particularly a younger audience, as young as teenagers or young professionals, college graduates. Is where we had such a large audience already, and the majority of adults that might be familiar with us from years ago, and as far back as the HD 414, and and then of course the audiophile community, and that's where so much focus was. But now to go into something like the Urbanite, that is, in a demographic that we've never focused on before, into that very young audience, but to have different materials and have an almost unbreakable product and a little more bass-heavy focus. So it is very different things that we haven't done, but the reach has been fantastic so far.
It does seem like you're doing fairly well at it. One of the things that is going to happen in the future here is we're going to have to continue to contend with Beats in who they are and what they do. The good news, from what I can tell, is actually they've made some significant improvements in their product line. A number of engineers from headphone companies talked to me starting maybe a couple of years ago, and they said, there's a whole bunch of Beats engineers showing up at the engineering conventions. And sure enough, after they've been there a couple of years, they came out with the new product lines, and the new products are significantly better than they used to be. But I think they're going to croak, and they're going to crash and burn. And the reason why, it's a complicated one. I think they're going to crash and burn, though, because they made their name by being really, really cool. And if you sell 50-some-odd% of all the headphones over $100, and it's ubiquitous everywhere, at some point you're just not going to be cool anymore, because you're everywhere, and somebody else is going to be the cool guy. And of course, now they're with Apple, and there's a whole other deal. We'll get to Beats some more in a little while, because I think they're going to do some really weird stuff. But we'll talk about that some more. But I think that you could be the new cool dude on the block with the Urbanite and the Momentum, and beginning to educate people a little bit. People get a little bit smarter, and then pretty soon they're going to go, yeah, but this other company, Sennheiser, they actually make all sorts of headphones, not just the 8 SKUs that Beats has, and they really know what they're doing. So I think you guys are in a good position, actually, to take market share from Beats.
We hope so.
Assuming Apple doesn't do something. Dan and Mr. Speaker, I know you were doing something new and interesting right now. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Ether?
Okay. Our first product that we brought out was a modified Fostex headphone. And we were doing that for the last couple of years. We came out with a couple of different lines, including some where we innovated and brought in the concept of using 3D printers to make the cups for a closed back headphone. And we basically developed the technology based on the way 3D printers work to create a double wall with a matrix inside it, so it isolates really well. So we've been doing closed back headphones for a while, and this year, back last month, we came out with our first open back headphone called Ether. And it's a complete ground up design now. We engineered everything in it down to the screws, literally. And one of the little cool factoids I like is, besides being super light, it weighs 13 ounces. It's also very efficient and can be played off of portable devices and less elaborate electronics. And part of the way we did that is through efficiency. And one of the neat things about it is our traces on the driver are so thin, there are over 27 feet of traces on a driver that big. So one of the things that's neat about Ether is it's also all metal. So the baffle is metal, the headband's metal, the pivots and gimbals are all metal, and despite being an all metal headphone, it weighs 13 ounces.
Cool. And what, having developed products before myself, it's not easy. What was the most challenging thing for you in this development?
Developing confidence that the voicing was right was really the hardest thing. Anybody can make a headphone, you know, it's a mechanical thing and you can assemble it, but making it sound right is really hard. And the hardest part to me is not second guessing myself. You know, there'll be moments when I'll say, oh, that's it, that's perfect, and then I'll put it on the next day and I'm going, well, is it? And that can go on for a long time and a lot of hours. So the hardest part for me was knowing when to stop.
Cool, thanks. Brandon, what are you doing that's new and cool?
So Noble Audio just came out with a wireless device. We call it the Noble BTS, or a Bluetooth solution. And basically what it is, it's a wireless module that has Bluetooth 4.0, aptX, and also supports Apple lossless. And the idea is that you can take your Noble IEMs, or really any in-ear monitor for that matter, and basically make them wireless instantly. So you don't confine yourself to a single wireless model. And so in addition to offering a lossless sound quality, it also serves as kind of a phone control. So a lot of these specialist in-ear monitors don't have push-button controls and microphones and things like that. So the BTS also has an omnidirectional microphone on it, and you can take calls, make calls, do all sorts of stuff with it with regards to your phone. So that's the latest and greatest from us.
Cool. Are there other ones like that on the market, or are you the only person doing that?
There are similar solutions out there, but none of them have really taken a focus on sound quality. A lot of them are made by phone manufacturers kind of as an accessory to their phones, and I think that we're the only one out there that has aptX and Apple lossless support. And the BTS also comes with a short 15.5-inch cable, since all our cables on our products are detachable. You can swap the cable out on your Noble IEMs for the short cable, and basically what that does is it enables you to wear the BTS kind of as like a pendant, or you can clip it to your shirt without having a whole lot of excess cable flying around.
Yeah. It's one of those products you look at and you go, well, duh, how come that hasn't been around for a while already? So it's a little Bluetooth gadget. So make sure any headphone into a Bluetooth headphone. He's focusing on the low on the IEMs and balanced armature drivers. That one thing is they need a very low output impedance on the device, and this particular device has a less than 1 ohm output impedance, which is really important for that. But I did put my PM3s on there, and while the volume was maxed on both my phone and that device, it was loud, plenty loud enough to listen to well. So I think it's more than just IEMs. It'll work on momentums and stuff like that, I would think. Yeah. All right, well, cool. Well, so that's the near term. Now I'm going to sit here and talk for a minute and hopefully get you guys to think of something really weird to say. So we'll go back to Apple and Beats because I think they're really important in the future. The thing about the headphone is that it's a device that I think is essentially in its infancy. Well, maybe third grade. Somewhere in that neighborhood. Headphones, for how long they've been around, really haven't made a lot of progress and gotten a lot of attention until Apple had the iPod and Monster came out with the Beats. And then there's this big flurry of activity for the last 5 or 8 years around headphones, and the public is becoming aware of them, and everybody's jumping on the bandwagon building headphones, and half of them don't know what they're doing, and most headphones suck. And that's an important thing for me to say as a person who's listened to a lot of headphones. Is that most headphones suck. And I think there's a lot of room for a lot of headphones to get a lot better. And I think actually just now we're actually starting to see a lot of headphones get a lot better. And so that's a really cool thing. You know, headphones are getting better. But the thing about headphones is that they're really popular because they're attached to your smartphone. And what I think we're going to see in the future here is a lot of smart headphones. Headphones that have position sensing detectors in it and stuff like that. Headphones that are maybe doing the audio processing for head-related transfer functions right in the headphone. So the smart device only has to send it the raw information, the raw audio stream, and then as you move your head around, it creates all the floaty stuff that it needs to do to convince you that sound is coming from outside your head, because that's what everybody really wants to get at, is sound outside your head. So I think Apple bought Beats not because of Beats streaming service, but because they had in Beats the world's largest headphone maker and a supply chain and development chain and distribution channels, well, everything it needed to turn on headphones. And I think very, very soon here, we're going to start seeing Beats headphones get smart and start being able to do a lot of weird, different stuff that we'll go into here in a minute. But I'll give you one idea, and is that the smartphone knows where it's at in space. And if you look at it every once in a while, the headphones can know where they're at in space. And a blind person could walk down the street and the smartphone is telling it, this is Mel's shoe store. And then from that direction, this is the drug store. And you're coming up to a street here in 20 feet. And so you can actually be able to give blind people situational awareness, which is something they cannot really have. They can have audio awareness, but be able to learn an environment and what's in it without actually physically having to touch it. And you can extend that technology to, if I were a tourist in China and couldn't read any of the signs, my smartphone and my smart headset, I go, what kind of store is that over there? And I'd look at it, and the smartphone would know where I was looking and go, oh, that's a octopus store, whatever it is. So now, going way off into the future, what do you guys see for headphones? Where are we going? What's going to happen?
One of the things that I think is probably worth thinking about is that there are so many different markets and applications for headphones. And one of them might be the type of stuff that you were referencing for example, things that allow you to interact with the headphone instead of maybe glasses. And it's probably arguably a smarter thing to interact with your headphone than something in front of your eyes. But another is that there are gaming markets and all sorts of markets that normally, as an audiophile manufacturer, we don't address, but that the convergence of computers and silicon is probably going to tie a little tighter together. Because you can probably understand why most people who are interested in gaming are going to want, if they're also interested in audio, are not going to want to have two convergent or divergent sets of equipment. But it does raise a kind of interesting question about how much you can build into the headphone and what types of stuff you can do with that. Our products, being planars, for example, have a higher load that they present to the amplifiers, and that means if you've got something that's self-powered, you have to have more battery, bigger amps, and other things. So that type of technology is probably restricted to stuff that's more like higher efficiency dynamics, or perhaps in-ear monitors with more, little wearable devices or things like Brandon's been working on. And I think what will happen is you'll end up seeing a bit of a divergence between kind of audiophile stuff and interactive stuff. And the interactive stuff that you're talking about through the Apple interface that they announced at the developers conference last year will probably end up having a huge diversity of form and function.
I think also as you start using headphones for situational awareness and localization, it becomes more important to have an accurate earphone. There have been a number of tests and studies that have shown that frequency response accuracy helps an awful lot if you're trying to place things in space. And if you're talking about walking around with headphones on that are your sole provider of information for your situation, it becomes really important. I mean, I'm not sure you'd want a 20 dB bass boost in that situation while you're walking into traffic or something like that. But it'll be interesting.
A few things to go along with that is, as technology will ultimately get better, it's kind of like, look at the television industry. Nobody enjoyed watching a hockey game until HD came along, and you can actually see what was happening. And headphones are kind of reaching that same plane now, where the technology is improving when you look at Bluetooth and aptX. That is improving overall sound quality in a wireless format, wired formats where we're getting better materials, smaller material, lighter material. In essence, the headphone is three pieces: your speaker, your housing, and your headband. And just by changing any of those things, and you're creating very different products overall. Now throw in a software system to it, working with Apple, and I think that's a great theory to have, that it would help someone who is handicapped in that situation to be, to give them a much better life experience, and live a better lifestyle. And that would be the ultimate goal, the ultimate compliment, to say, someone says, your headphones have not only improved my livelihood and have often saved my life when crossing the street, and I don't get hit by a car because my phone told me, hold on, there's a car coming. And I wouldn't have been able to hear it on a busy street of New York City unless I had these headphones on, and they provided this sound and this comfort, and I enjoy wearing it all around. That would be an honor and a privilege to be a company that can do that. And hopefully it's not, if it does happen, it's not exclusive. I think everybody would love to have that opportunity, but I think we should expect some crazy things to happen over the next couple of years.
Brandon, I know that somebody put some biometric sensors in your headphone. A couple of people actually. Have you guys thought about that at all?
I guess we've thought about it, but we haven't done it. And I don't know, I'm kind of with Dan on this one, that there's going to be kind of two different parties or groups. You're going to have a mass market oriented future, and you're going to have an audiophile future, and they're different futures in some ways, and in others they're the same. So I'm not exactly sure if biometric sensors are in Noble Audio's future.
I'm going to say something now that at least you two guys are going to hate to hear. But it's my belief that Dave is exactly right. In order to get this sound to sound like it's coming from outside your head, and that's the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail here is people playing games and actually hearing things, virtual reality, augmented reality. They've got to convince you the sound is coming from outside your head, and that you can tell where it's coming from and how far away it's coming from. It's a very, 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 very tricky thing to do. But I think they'll be able to do it. But one of the byproducts of doing that is that these localization cues happen kind of in the 1 to 7,000. I don't know, I'm making it wider than it really needs to be, 2 to 5K or something like that region. That's where all these little cues come from that you can tell where sound is coming from, sort of higher frequency stuff. And in most headphones, remember that headphones are mostly crap. Most headphones, that's where the problems are. It's the acoustics around the driver, and the driver going non-linear, and all that stuff happens between 2 and 5K kind of. All right, well, in order to get this sound like it's coming from outside your head, you've got to be able to control the diaphragm and fix it. And generally speaking, they're going to fix it by having good devices that operate linearly most of the time, and then they'll use DSP to fix it, and then use DSP to add on all these extra cues and stuff like that. So they're going to use digital signal processing to fix it. But here's the thing, in order to make it really convincing, they have to be able to really control the diaphragm and make it sound exactly the way they want it to sound, which means that they can sound great. They can sound perfect, so to speak, if you can figure out what perfect is. So the trick is, and on a passive headphone, on a headphone like you guys are talking about, the audiophile headphones, you're not going to have any of that correction. You're going to have to correct it in manufacturing. And that's not easy. It's not easy to control it passively. So the really question to me is, 10 years from now, are the consumer headphones going to be capable of sounding better than the audiophile headphones that are passive?
Depends how transparent the processing is. Because that's always been the catch with that sort of thing, is if you can come up with a perfect DSP, then you could have a perfect response. They just have never quite hit it yet. And maybe they will, but that's the goal. It's like, I was talking to someone the other day about the hip-related transfer function issue. I'm not an expert on that at all. But this person has done a lot of studying and has a PhD. Actually, at Dan Mapes, he works for us, and he's got a PhD in psychoacoustics. And he was explaining that the head-related transfer function is different based on how far it is. So you could theoretically have an infinite number of steps to get it absolutely perfect. So it always comes down to compromises in processing power and what you can actually handle within the DSP system. So could you do it? Sure. At some point, will they? Probably, at least to the point where it's good enough for most people. The question is when. So I don't know the answer to that question.
I think it's directly analogous to home audio, where DSP has been introduced for quite a long time, and I think it's probably is not a terribly controversial statement to say that using room correction is not going to give you a better sound experience than having a well-done room with a good set of speakers in it. It's a way to improve something that's probably fairly mediocre to get it to something that's acceptable, but it's not going to replace fundamentals of low distortion, good transient response, no breakout modes, dynamic range, and other factors that you can't necessarily use software to correct for. Yeah, it's a great way to make cheap stuff not sound cheap, but it's not a great way to make stuff sound audiophile.
Okay. Let's see.
Brandon, you didn't rise to the bait, man. You lost an opportunity to come out swinging. Wake up.
I think you're right, Dan. I mean, I think that is the crux of the issue is there is going to be this fight between doing it au natural and then by horsepower, and both ways are going to be legitimate. And the horsepower way is going to get better, not worse. I would say that cheap home theater systems that you can get at Walmart are actually pretty good sounding, considering what they could sound like. But they don't get where these folks are wanting to get. That's for sure.
Yeah, you certainly get a better experience with a $1,000 home theater in a box with 5 speakers than you would have 10 years ago. Even though the value of that money is now less than it was. If you paid $1,000 10 years ago for a system, it would probably sound thoroughly mediocre compared to what you get out of it today. But and that's true. I mean, how many people over 35 in this room had a set of headphones 15 years ago? How many do now? Less. So much for that theory. Okay. Well, my next point is not going to be made. I was actually postulating that because a lot of people did not have headphones prior to the kind of release of the iPod, and that it was maybe this is the wrong audience for it because of the specific audio interest, but the population at large did not usually have headphones. My mom did not have any headphones. Now she's got 3 or 4 earbuds and headphones, and it's just stuff that is naturally part of somebody's experience now. And I think that as it relates to home theater, it's probably an even more pervasive for the diversity diversification of the market, I think, to actually support a more robust high-end community as more and more people expect more and more of their headphones. I think that will correlate to more and more interest in higher performance.
So if we're talking about the future of, get away from the smart headphones for a little while, if we're talking about the future of audiophile headphones, where are we at?
This has been a great couple of years, you know. Odyssey and Hi-Fi Man and now us made new and interesting planers. There's some really great products that Sennheiser and some of the other bigger players have brought to market, Philips. I think everybody's taking sound quality in headphones a lot more seriously, and it's not a given that you can just put a headphone out and it'll sell. People are actually trying to make headphones that are good enough to justify selling. And that's probably perhaps a good counterpoint to the notion that Beats developed on, which is it kind of didn't matter so much how it sounded, so much as how it was marketed. And with a lot of companies putting more and more attention into making better sounding products, I think that's a great time to be a consumer.
Actually, one of the thoughts that comes to mind, because I'm going to talk about it tomorrow on the interpretation of headphone measurements, but where do you think we're going in terms of the tonal character of headphones? Because there's a lot of controversy, or a lot of, I shouldn't say controversy, there's a lot of interest right now on knowing where neutral is at. Is there a neutral? Is that where headphones belong? And how close do you guys think you are to it?
In my opinion of that, it's so subjective. You know, you can claim a flat or transparent, you know, reference headphone, for example, but it depends on, you know, what else is in play, what else is in the signal path. Is your amplifier adding any coloration to the sound? Your source, you know, to be flat or neutral, everything has to be in. And you know, to achieve that, you're spending, you know, beyond most means in some cases. So a lot of customers can, you know, cut corners in some cases, and they'll say, well, I'm not getting this, when you have to dig a little bit deeper. You know, ways of measuring will vary. I'm not aware of any, or at least I haven't seen any kind of one true standard that would say out of these 5, this is the most of this industry leading. Nobody could argue this point. If there is, I'm sure you would tell me.
Well, I can tell you that Harman is working on it.
Yeah. So, you know, and I think to me it's just events like this where you can go and check it out and see what you like, and you know, if you buy something, bring it home. If you like it, awesome. And if you don't, you want to find something else.
So I just recently did a review of your new Momentum 2 wireless headphone.
Yes.
Which I liked very much. But I didn't think it sounded like an audiophile product. It was mid-fi kind of sounding. But that, mid-fi sounding in a wireless, noise-canceling Bluetooth headphone is unbelievably good, because most of them are just wretched. And so I think they've accomplished something, which is to get something that sounds decent, doing noise canceling and wireless headset and stuff like that. So it's not a knock. It's a very good product. I did notice that the tonality changed when you turned the noise canceling on. Basically, when it goes active, the tonality changed. And I noticed it when I got on an airplane, actually, because that was kind of the first day I used it, and I'm going on a flight, I'll charge it. And it got a little harder, more forward sounding when it went active. And after a while, one thing is your brain acclimates to these things. But after a while, I also came to realize that maybe that's actually a good thing in this airplane where there's a lot of noise going on, that the speech intelligibility area was a little more forward. Are you aware of design criteria where Sennheiser says, okay, we're not looking for neutral, we're looking for something that works in this application?
And that's the appropriate word for it, is application. Sennheiser, who might have one of the largest selection of headphones on the market right now. We make headphones not just for wireless home use, professional recording studios, mastering facilities, lifestyle headphones like Momentum and Urbanite, in-ears and gaming, and so many different places where it's the right tool for a particular job. And we have a few tools that are multi-purpose that you can use for many things, and then we have some that are so focused, like our audiometry headsets. You're really only using it for that one purpose. As where someone with an HD 650, they're going to use it at home and for their regular use. If they work in a recording studio, they'll also take it and use it for their job, how they're making money, and it becomes a way for them to earn a living. And the Momentum customer, this is the person who's going to school or commuting and needs better isolation, and might be listening to not so much classical music where they're going to want a more neutral sound, but more rock or rap and hip hop, and want a little more low end to it. Of course, a done better.
What's the DJ, the HD8 DJ, HD?
Yeah, the HD DJ, yeah.
I got some of those headphones into review, and they were not flat at all, or anywhere near what I would consider flat. And I listen to it and I go, man, these are just weird. And so I called somebody I knew at Sennheiser in to chat with them a little bit about it, and they go, oh yeah, we know. What you have to do is go sit in front of some speakers playing a different piece of music really loud, and you want to monitor it, what's going on in your headphone, and with one ear off and hear the music over there. And what you find is that this EQ curve that throws out everything but the bottom bass and some little section of the treble that you can cue some stuff off of is the way to go. And to which I said, okay, but I can't review these headphones because that's not what I do. So I have no idea if they're good at that or not. And so there's definitely some things like that where you just got to go, okay, it's just different. It's supposed to be that way, blah, blah, blah. Dave, why don't you tell, this is a kind of a weird one since we're on the frequency response thing. So when you put an in-ear headphone in your ear, you don't get any reflections off your concha here, and you don't get you change the resonances of your ear canal because you change the size of your ear canal. And in your ear, you want to hear this peak at about 3.5K. And I didn't know this, but can you tell us how you get that peak at 3.5K?
It's actually 2.7.
2.7,
2.8-ish. Sorry. Sorry. Well, it's the natural resonance of the ear canal itself. And when you talk about target curves, I think all different companies have their own target curves, but we've gone back to the same target curve, which is based on a dissertation that my boss did, I think in the 70s. But the curve is it's pretty much unchanged since then. And it's very similar to one that THX uses for theirs, but it's basically the open ear canal resonance. And you need to put that back in when you seal the earphone in your ear, because that's what your brain hears as flat. It's not a flat response, but that's what your brain thinks it is, and your brain is the final arbiter of what it actually needs to be. And you talked about Harmon, Sean Ollis, I assume you're talking about his research, and he's pretty much found the same target curve for accuracy. He added a listener, now he might come here and tell me I'm obscuring his results, but my impression of it from reading was that he allowed the users to dial in a little bit low end. They boosted up a little bit. I think a cutoff frequency of about 200 hertz, and then went up about 5 dB or something like that. I'm going by memory, so don't quote me on that. But basically, more or less, flat is flat. And we used to do a demo years ago where we would bring our Keymar, our binaural mannequin, to shows, and we would make a recording, and then we would take the recording and we'd feed it back into the earphones. We'd make a recording, and it would basically sound the same. We took some other earphones, and by the third recording, it sounded like you were either underwater, or it was just this really bright, shrieking mess, or somewhere in between. But that's not everybody's target. That's our target. If you're talking about fidelity, that's what we're going more, but accuracy is often in the ear of the listener.
But how do you get that peak? What is it that gives you the peak?
Well, you put it in acoustically. It's a combination. It's small tube acoustics. It's a combination of the length of the tube, the diameter of the tube, and the terminating damper, and all sorts of other
I
things.
thought you said it was the primary residence of the driver.
Sometimes it is.
Sometimes.
Sometimes it's a system. It's taken out in space, not necessarily, and sometimes the driver is there. Sometimes it needs to be kind of moved into position through other little tricks.
If you move it through other little tricks, do you still see the wiggle in the impedance curve where you want it?
Depends on the driver technology.
Sorry, getting home technical and stuff. What else we got about features? Well, so yeah.
So I would wanted to say something about frequency response too, which is that I think I had a few concerns and issues with that Harman test. I wasn't a big fan of the methodology on it, and I wasn't a big fan of the conclusions. And I thought the sample size was very small for the conclusion they were trying to make, which affects potentially a large body of people. You have to have more statistical relevance, and I think it was like 28 people, something like that. So I had some concerns about the methodology. Also, it makes certain assumptions that also need more thought or evaluation. For example, is a circumaural headphone's target frequency response curve going to be the same as an in-ear monitor? Well, no. Is it going to be the same as a on-ear headphone? Probably no, because on-ears are beginning to affect the collection.
But at the eardrum, they should be the same.
Well, that's right. I mean, ideally what you want is at the eardrum, you should be hearing flat. Now, other factors affect that. There's a well-known one of bone conduction, for example, which is that bass energy in live music will vibrate your whole body, and you perceive that as part of the frequency response of the bass. Certain devices like in-ear monitors can't produce any bone conduction at all, but by the time you're on full-size circumaural that's moving a fair amount of air, it's actually beginning to generate that. And so there's a driver size and a power factor in the transducer that affects the perception of frequency response. And when I work with like our ethers, which have, or our alpha primes, which have a lot of power in the bass region and can project down to 10 hertz, I don't find that tipping the EQ up is a positive thing in the bass. It tends to sound exaggerated and woolly. And so the nature of the driver and how it's interacting with the area around the ear, the bones structure, and other things play into effect and impact how we perceive flatness. So it's a really complicated, to my mind, it's a really complicated subject. When you almost have to have different curves and different, based on the kind of interaction that transducer is going to have with the listener.
Brandon, you're only wiggling people's eardrums. You're not giving any hints of bone conduction and stuff like that. What do you think about bass and where it needs to be at for your product?
I really feel like my partner John, who's a doctor of audiology, probably could speak to this a little bit more on the technical level, but I think what we find with our products, since we're not a artist or professional driven in-ear company like a lot of our competitors are, we're more of an audiophile or just kind of a consumer focused in-ear company, custom in-ear company, is that a lot of people think that they want to hear neutral or flat, but it's not actually what they want to hear. And so that's kind of something that we've seen, we've experienced it, and then we try to cater to it to some extent. So yeah.
Which means what?
Which means we have, a lot of different products that sound very different. We have linear sounding, like our 4 driver is very linear sounding, and then we have our 6 driver, which is based off of our 4, but does certain things slightly differently. And then our 10 driver is similar to our 6, but so it just means that we have a lot of different products for a lot of different people who like different things, and it's not necessarily neutral or flat.
Well, I have to throw out in this dialogue this tricky thing about our brains having an unbelievable ability to adjust. I don't know if any of you have heard about this. There was a study done somewhere around the time of the Second World War by the Army where they put on glasses on people that turned everything upside down. Anybody hear about this? Raise your hand. Yeah. So they made people wear these glasses that had like lenses on them stuck out that turned everything upside down. And of course, these people were, and they're not allowed to take the glasses off. And of course, these people were just stumbling on the ground and couldn't write, and couldn't eat, and just couldn't do anything at first. But after 3 weeks' time, these people perceived the world as normal through these glasses that turned everything upside down. They could ride bicycles, they could balance water, go up and down stairs and run and blah, blah, blah. And then when they took the glasses off, they were stumbling around again because things were upside down. Now, think of the wiring going on. How does that do that? And then you're used to your headphones. If you add bass, there's extra bass now, and you know that there's extra bass, and you're hearing extra bass. The question is, are you actually right? Whatever right means, but
Yeah, I call it brain burn-in, and actually one of the things that we try to do is, you'll almost never see me go back and forth between headphones ever, because I find that to be a completely dysfunctional way to evaluate what I'm hearing. For me, I find myself, I try to do everything I can to isolate myself from the headphone, and I think only of one thing, which is the tonality. And then I can kind of hear past the conditioning that you're used to. But it's really tough, and if you don't do that day in and day out, I don't think it was a learned thing. I don't know if you've had that or not, or if any of you guys do. But I could not tune or compare to other headphones that way or walk around the show. Now I can, it's sort of like being able to put on those glasses and take them off at will, because both make sense.
right.
But you have to live it. And I mean, you probably find you can hear what you need to hear very quickly, right?
Pretty. I will say that I can come up with an opinion very quickly. But my experience is that opinion is not necessarily right.
It's first impression.
Yeah, and that first impression, I can have a strong first impression, but I won't say often, but it's often enough not right or changes significantly enough that I know not to trust that first impression very much.
Yeah, I remember when I first got into headphones, I'd go back and forth between them and be like, they all sound so different. What's right? And it was really difficult to learn to hear past the headphone and perceive, and what it sounds supposed to sound like. For that reason, I will not listen or make any judgment about headphone unless I'm using acoustic music. It's like designing speakers. If you can get the acoustic right, the other stuff will follow. But as soon as it's studio work or electronica, things like that, it may sound great, but you have no idea what it's supposed to sound like.
Yeah,
And
I tend to focus on voice because to me, voice is something that you're intimately familiar with.
Yeah.
People's voices. So,
And
of course, you
somebody
don't get
made
bass out of it, but
I think Steve Guttenberg made a fabulous point once, and he was talking about, and it might have been in a discussion he had with you in one of the articles that you guys wrote, but he made the point when people say they don't have audio memory, that people don't have audio memory, it's too hard to remember when you go. If I talk to you on the phone, I haven't seen you for some arbitrary period of time, I know who you are. I have auditory memory. I think people don't give themselves enough credit or trust their senses enough to say, that doesn't sound right, or that does sound right, and that's why people do this kind of obsessive back and forth a lot. But I think people should just relax about it, because you can hear right.
I think listening to headphones is a learned skill though, because it's artificial. It's not a normal acoustic. And just recently, John Iverson, who's the DAC reviewer at Stereophile and also is the web monkey, he works on the web, and I have a weekly phone call with him. He has a home studio and it needed a pair of headphones and was grilling me on which headphones to get. I go, look, let me just send you a box of headphones. I need them back fairly quickly, but I'll send you a box of 8 headphones or something like that. And I sent him a box of 8 headphones, and after a week he calls me back and he goes, man, that was rough. I had no idea how different it was going to be listening to headphones. So here's a person who's a professional reviewer and then has to really go through and evaluate headphones for the first time and was really having a difficult time, And I think that's true. Headphones is something that it takes a long time to actually get past how weird headphones are to be able to go, okay, you just stick headphones on and you can kind of tell how good they sound. We're getting close to the end here, so I'm just going to throw it open to the audience since we've been just so tight on these topics that we've been discussing. Open it up to you guys. Yeah.
I just want to get your thoughts on some of the software, like some of the apps that are available, like Can Opener and other apps, and what is it, Out of Your Head, which is a kind of a head-related transfer function type thing, which is, I think, based on the software, the designer's own measurements. What are you hearing about that? Because like you, for me, the holy grail is the ability to get a truly convincing three-dimensional soundstage through headphones.
Through headphones.
At a price that's a little bit lower than what Smith Research charges for their.
Well, evidently Smith Research is thinking about putting together a Kickstarter on a new product. I don't know if you saw that at CanJam. They had a prototype-looking thing. It was just a prototype-looking thing, but. So the question was about 3D sound processors and which ones are good. The Out of Your Head is actually kind of a different deal because they actually put a microphone they put microphones in people's ears, oftentimes it's Darren's ears himself, and he sits in front of a stereo or a home theater system, and then he puts chirps through the speakers that allow him to measure the characteristics of the speakers to set up a DSP filter that is derived from that particular audio system. And then you can play any music you want through that DSP filter, and it sounds like it's coming from that stereo. And I would say his system is one of the best I've heard, actually. It does sound pretty darn good. It's limited in that it only plays back that one filter, and you can't make adjustments on the filter.
And
right?
it doesn't account for, there's no way to put
there's no way to add head movement. I mean, you'd have to measure it at
Yeah.
different angles and then, click those through the filters or something like that. But there's no. And then other than that, the Smith Realizer is the best I've heard. And of course, it does very much the same thing. You actually have to measure your own ears with microphones in your ears. Dave will tell you, I've actually, at Etymotic, this is just one of those weird points that had these capillary microphones put in your ears so it's measuring right at your own eardrum. And when you look at the EQ of your two ears, there will be places where it may be 5 dB different between your two ears. So even your own ears are EQ'd different, and your brain has filtered it all out in the end. But I do think that those processes, that surround stuff, will get a lot better really fast. That's something that's going to come along really, really fast, I think. I think we're going to see Apple products within 3 years.
And what's happening with DTS? What was that DTS?
Headphone X.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another one like that. Their demo is very, very convincing, but it's very, very controlled. They have the problem of having to deal with many, many, many different crappy headphones. So it doesn't work very well on the crappy headphones. So they're actually working directly with manufacturers now, trying to qualify headphones. So this headphone is TTS certified, and then it'll work on their product. And then I think they're going to individually measure the headphones, and then there'll be a setting drop-down menu, and you can pick that headphone. So I don't think there's any that sound very good, except for those cases where you're measuring your own ears, and none of them are very convincing to me. But I think we'll see more convincing stuff as time goes on, pretty quick. Any other questions? Yeah.
On that topic, just around, I was just double checking, trying to remember the name, but in the gaming community, Razer has this new Tiamat 7.1 with end-discrete drivers, and it's multi-channel inputs and multi-driver headphones and things like that. It sounds like crap, but it does have a really interesting surround experience. Is that the way to do this, or is it by digitally modifying the signal before we get get to sending that analog out and trying to fake it? What do you guys think is the right way?
There's two schools of thought. There's one of saying, 5.1 is 5 speakers and a sub, therefore I must put 5 speakers and some LFE into a headphone. And we found, asking most people, and they're kind of, they're split. The audience is split. I mean, there's the razor loyal that swear by it, and they do make cool stuff. But for someone who is a gamer and has that much passion about it and cares about the sound as much as the experience of the game itself and what they're doing, they'll find typically a better virtual experience that's done on single driver on both ears, and it is done either after the fact or via the source. So let's say if it's a PC and that is doing it a Dolby 5171, and then that's getting decoded after in either like a USB card and then being sent virtually in just a standard stereo, they oftentimes will enjoy that experience better. But that's also will be a better headphone in that regard too. So it'll vary. Sennheiser ourselves, we don't do the multi-channel driver in anything. And we feel that it is better doing it DSP-wise until something else gets better, especially if it comes down to apps on mobile and things like that will all carry over.
I want to address that just a little bit too. One thing to realize is that the way you localize sound is the sound coming at you in a planar wave, so to speak, and your ability to hear how the reflections are off your head. And a headphone is a coupler, and it fundamentally, sound gets to your ears a little differently in that coupler. Once you get wavelength longer than the size of that coupler dimension, then it's just pressurizing the interior of that coupler, and you really don't have the sense of where sound is coming from because it's not like normal sound to a certain extent. And I agree that I've never heard a multi-driver thing that sounded any good at all. And then lastly,
I didn't say that.
Huh?
I didn't
Well,
say
I'll
that
say
any good at all.
I'll say it. I've never heard one that really sounded any good at all. Well, at least it made it sound like it was a surround system at all. And then the other thing that's really important to know is that when they do studies of people and they clamp their heads into place and then play sounds from different points in space, and then unclamp their heads and play sound where they can move their head, their ability to localize where the sound comes from increases by an order of magnitude. Their ability to know where the sound is coming from is way narrower. So when you localize sound, you do it through head movement. And that's why head movement and having the HRTF, the head-related transfer functions, change with your head movement is like the holy grail. That's what's going to put it out of your head. Until they do that, it's just really not going to sound like it's coming from out there.
So is that the way that we solve this in the future?
It's DSP.
Is by having the head movement tracked against potentially a focal point, whether if you're on a computer monitor, whether you're on your phone, the forward-facing camera, in a theater system, or a television or something like that, is tracking the head movement then, and then applying that digitally to a single driver solution. The
Right.
way that surround actually becomes a reality in headphones.
That's where it will
Almost
lead
certainly.
to. Yes.
Almost certainly. And gyros, the laser gyros, the optical gyros that you put on a chip, man, it's easy for them to do relative, right? So having relative head movements, what you want is when you go like this, for the sound to stay here and then slowly come back to where the head is, right? So that's what the Smith Realizer, I think, does that. In fact. But yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if anyone would like to comment on the future of pricing. Meaning there's essentially these tiers of $399, $699, $1299 where strata quality right now. Electronics tends to get cheaper over time. We psychologically locked to quality ideas. So I'm just wondering if, what kind of movement you might predict in that. Meaning, are we going to see quality get cheaper for things that are now, reasonably expensive? Are we going to see the high-end stuff differential between the mid-price and the high change? Anything about that?
I think you've been seeing it already happening. The average $500 headphone this year is much better than it was 4 years ago. There have been a lot of improvements in the mid-range, and the high-end has been pushing to get better and better because of that. I'm not going to argue that the under $50 stuff's gotten any better. I doubt that it has, because that's not made by people who are focused at all on quantity or quality.
Actually, I think even the cheaper headphones are getting better.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take an unpopular position probably with these guys and say that one of the reasons why I say that the headphones are in the third grade is because they've overpriced themselves. I think headphones right now are probably 2 or 3 times more expensive than they should be. I think
You're right, you're not going to be very popular.
headphones need to be less expensive across the board. And I think as the market matures, that will happen. But I think we're also at a point in the market right now where people are inventing stuff which you don't see in the headphone, but it's very, very expensive.
You have to remember though that making a headphone it's a business. We keep making everything cheaper to the customer, and again, it's only to hit certain price points, move a lot of units, keep the lights on. But then that stops the motivation to reinvent and make it better, because then you become complacent to just say, okay, they like it the way it is with this material, and we get away from something having an all metal build, and we try to figure out some kind of composite as a workaround just to put more. And as you do get more popular, you have to grow, and you have to stabilize yourself money wise. And that's where I think the improvements are coming from. Is we know what price points work, and now it's how do we keep something there but still have a quality product that might replace it 3 or 5 years down the road. So it's something where we go, okay, used to be leatherette and a composite headphone, now we get into stainless steel and a genuine leather or Alcantara, and we look at these different materials that say, okay, you're still paying for a name and performance, but you're buying something that has minimum maintenance and will last you so many years, if not a lifetime of use. And that's really what you go for, and that's what builds customer loyalty as well.
His question is directly related, and your answer is directly related to styling. We haven't yet talked about styling, but that's also the business side of it, and that sells in all of your markets. That sells a lot of product as well. So styling, we've already defined that the audio side is subjective, but styling also sells, and that's part of the success.
There's a number of fashion brands out there that play on that aspect of it, and they're very successful at what they do. It's a complicated business, and I don't think anybody's at fault for or gouging or something like that at the prices they are. It's a matter of the market's going to have to settle out. We have reached the end of our time, folks. Now that you know the future of headphones, you'll know what to buy next. Thank you very much for coming by, and thank you guys.